Welcome into Locked On Phillies. In today's episode, we talk about what could be called the hidden gem of this year's free agent class in Major League Baseball. One, Masataka Yoshida. We'll break down what the Japanese star could bring to the Philadelphia Phillies in today's Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is indeed Locked On Phillies. Welcome in. I'm your host, Connor Thomas, former collegiate, former semi-pro baseball pitcher, and happy to be here with you as your host of Locked On Phillies. Thank you so much for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We are indeed free and available wherever your podcast. You can check us out on YouTube, Odyssey app, everywhere you consume your online content. We're there. Locked On Phillies is your number one source for Phillies information. And let's get into one of the most interesting points of information this offseason. I want to talk and try and all-encompass cover what's going on with Masataka Yoshida. Now, if you're not familiar with Yoshida's name, it's because he's newer in the news. Now, if you follow the Phillies and Major League Baseball, you'll know that Yoshida is a big-time star in Japan. He's a two-time batting champion in the professional league over in Japan. And he's decided that he wants his current team over there. So he's playing with the Oryx Buffaloes is the name of the team that currently has him under contract. He's going to ask them, it sounds like per reports, to post him for Major League Baseball free agency. Then there's a 30-day period once he's posted, once his team allows him to go ahead and seek a contract with a Major League team. He has 30 days from that date to work out an agreement with a team. So who is Masataka Yoshida? Well, he's 29, plays corner outfield, and, well, his career over there, pretty darn good. Just listen to what he's slashing. 326 batting average, 419, 538 is the slash line. 135 home runs, and he's 21 for 31 on stolen bases. Just an all-around really, really good player over there. He's 120 more walks in his career than strikeouts. His career strikeout rate, just slightly over 9.4%. So, yeah, he's a really, really good hitter over in Japan. But proof from previous guys that have come over says those guys can translate to Major League Baseball. Maybe not on that level, but he's a guy that's just a true, really, really good hitter. Can play outfield well enough. All right speed, nothing spectacular athletically, but he has the power. He has the average for sure. Some folks believe that he could potentially hit leadoff at the Major League level. Don't know where exactly he slots into the Phillies lineup. What I do know is this is a talented baseball player that some team is going to throw a good amount of money at to employ his services if he does indeed get posted and works everything out on a contract to come to America and play in the majors. So where does he fit in with the Phillies? That's the first question. How does he fit in? This is where it's interesting, right? Because you think about the Phillies outfield and you say, okay, well, you've already got three starting corner outfielders in Nick Castellanos, Kyle Schwarber, and Bryce Harper. One of those guys is going to DH. And where does Yoshida fit into those plans? It's a great question. It's fair. Here's something I will say. If you're DHing one of those guys, whether it's Nick Castellanos or Kyle Schwarber, and you're assuming Bryce Harper is going to be missing some time with his elbow injury and recovery from what's assumed to be surgery upcoming for that, well, then you can move a Kyle Schwarber to DH, and you can play Yoshida in left field. You can move a Nick Castellanos to DH, and you could play Yoshida in right field. So there is an interesting opening for him to play right away if Bryce Harper does indeed miss significant time of the 2023 season. So that's the opening, right? The Phillies also need a leadoff bat. Now, if they go out and get Trey Turner, of course, Yoshida is not going to usurp Trey Turner to bat leadoff, I wouldn't guess. At some point, maybe the year, he might fit in there on an off day for Turner if he is indeed in the Phillies, which a lot assuming there. But let's say Turner doesn't happen and Yoshida does. Masataka Yoshida could very well be your best option batting leadoff for the Philadelphia Phillies in 2023 if he's a member of this team. So that's something that the Phillies are certainly interested in. But a lot of teams, it seems like, would be interested in a corner outfielder that looks like he's going to hit over 300 and leave the yard maybe 15 to 20 times and be a really, really good hitter at the major league level. Why do the Philadelphia Phillies fit? Well, believe it or not, Masataka Yoshida is a huge Philadelphia Phillies fan. Or rather, he's a huge Bryce Harper fan. He named his dog after Bryce Harper, for goodness sake. And he follows Harper religiously, is a huge Harper guy. His preference is to play for the Phillies so that he could play with Bryce Harper. So you remember when Bryce Harper first got here in our original thought in his first press conference, he mentioned it as well. Hey, maybe now he'll be able to lure Mike Trout here. And then Mike Trout signs the big contract, but there was still the thought that like Bryce Harper is going to invite other stars to play in Philly. Sure, it had some effect on why Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos wanted to be here this past free agent class. But I don't think we ever could have imagined that Bryce Harper could play such a big role in potentially coaxing a international star from Japan in Masataka Yoshida to come and want to play for the Philadelphia Phillies. But hey, that is the star power and the gravitational pull that Bryce Harper has on other stars around the game, both here in the United States and abroad. So that's why the interest in the Phillies is there, even though there may not necessarily be a spot that seems logical for him to fit. Well, he would like to play here. And when a star player that other teams are going to have interest in wants to play here, you go out and you find a way to make that happen. The Phillies should be exhausting every opportunity to make sure Masataka Yoshida ends up wearing red pinstripes and figure out where he fits later. Pay him the money, and you can never have too many good players. That would be awesome for the Philadelphia Phillies to add him. And the fact that he has that connection with Bryce Harper and wants to play with him is another thing that points in the direction. But okay, we know he's good. And we know he likes Bryce Harper, and his preference is reported to be the Phillies. But the question is, how much is he going to cost? What's the monetary amount? What's the length of contract you're looking at? He's 29. So what does all of that mean? How does he fit in? We don't know. And it varies for players coming over from Japan or players coming from internationally, anywhere, what they end up getting paid when things like this happen. The most recent example is Seiya Suzuki, who signed a 5-year contract with the Chicago Cubs last offseason worth $85 million. So 5 years, $85 million for Suzuki. Now, Yoshida's 29. A 5-year deal would take him to 34. I don't think that's too much. $85 million, right around in the frame of what you're looking at. I'd imagine you could probably get Yoshida for about that same deal. And something that I had an argument with on the morning show, on the John Kincaid show over on 97.5 The Fanatic recently, was I said that there's a potential that he takes a discount to end up in Philadelphia because of what we just talked about, the Bryce Harper love, the want to play with him, his idol plays here, this, that, and the other thing. And it's not a hometown contract, obviously, because his hometown is on the other side of the world, but it's certainly possible. I firmly believe it's possible that Yoshida takes less money to play in Philadelphia than he would to play elsewhere. How much less that is, I don't know. And is that a sure thing? Not by a long shot, but that's something that I would explore where you could be looking at 80, 85 million for a 5-year contract for this player. And if you want to sign him to a shorter term, you could be looking at something shorter. But just to do the numbers, because I'm terrible at math, 5 years, 85 would be an annual value of about $17 million. I'd imagine the price point for Yoshida is somewhere between $15 and $20 million a year. So are the Phillies willing to shell that out for an outfielder who, when Bryce Harper's healthy, probably won't play all that much? It's a tough question. It's a tough balance. It'd be great if he played first base. That'd be really helpful because then you could go ahead and move Rhys Hoskins and feel all right about that. Not that I think you should just get rid of Rhys Hoskins to get rid of him, but if you can move him in a contract year so you don't have to worry about losing him for nothing at the end of the 2023 season, get some pitching for a player that is going to be desirable in Rhys Hoskins, and then play Yoshida at first base. That would be interesting, but It's a unique situation that we don't see very often in baseball. And we certainly don't see it ever here in Philadelphia, where an international star wants to get posted by his team, come halfway around the world, and play for the Phillies. That's normally like the Yankees or the Dodgers. It's a great feeling to have him be interested in the Philadelphia Phillies. And hopefully, Dave Dombrowski and the Phillies are just as interested in him when indeed his contract, well, if and when indeed his contract is posted by the Buffaloes, who he currently plays for over there in Japan. So that's your crash course in Masataka Yoshida. And we'll keep an eye on him and the news surrounding him because it's very interesting the effect that he's going to have on this free agent class and how he factors in to the outfield market with some other big names out there. Of course, Aaron Judge, Brandon Nimmo, Michael Conforto, who didn't play all last year with an injury. It'll be interesting to see how Yoshida factors in. But that's the ties to the Phillies, how he would potentially fit, and what he may cost. Coming up next, we're going to jump into a player review, and we're going to talk about one of the newer members of the Philadelphia Phillies. It won't be a full season review because he joined them at the trade deadline, but their center fielder, because we've done the corner outfield. How did Brandon Marsh do in 2022 with the Philadelphia Phillies? And more importantly, maybe, what could Brandon Marsh be in the future? A young player who has, in my opinion, great potential. But I'll tell you more about that coming up next on the next segment of today's Locked On Phillies. First, though, I want to tell you about my friends over at SimpliSafe because SimpliSafe is one of my favorite products that we endorse here on the Locked On Network and here on Locked On Phillies. SimpliSafe, I trust them with my mom's life. I can't say it enough. I'll say it every single time I do this read. Every time I tell you about SimpliSafe, I will tell you that I trust them with my mom's life because we had a break-in back in my childhood home where she now lives alone. Luckily, she wasn't home, but that crashes your sense of security. And for me, being a son, not able to be there and look out for my mom, I need someone and a company and a product that I could trust with her safety, and that is SimpliSafe. They've got such great technology and everything, and you can customize it. There's not just like you pay for this and they come out and you get the same system as Jimmy down the block and this guy on the other neighborhood and whatever. No, you can customize it to how much security you need, cameras, sensors, if you want that. For everyone, they have 24/7 monitoring. So there's a SimpliSafe agent always available. They have such cool technology. Like they know whether or not it's a break-in or whether or not like a window just got broken by like a baseball if you're playing catch in the backyard or something. It's absolutely awesome what they do over at SimpliSafe. And I can't give them a bigger endorsement than the fact that I trust them with my mom's life. So don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. You can get 50% off any new SimpliSafe system at simplisafe.com/LockedOnMLB. It's their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. There is no safe like SimpliSafe. All right, let's talk about the newest Phillies outfielder that's actually on the team. I know we just talked about an outfielder in Masataka Yoshida who could be joining the team, but the newest acquired outfielder for the Philadelphia Phillies, and we're not counting Johan Rojas, who was added to the 40-man yesterday. I know someone's going to be in the comments saying they just added Rojas, so technically, no. Okay, major league level, guy that's playing for them, it's Brandon Marsh. Captain Caveman, you know him, the long hair, the long beard, acquired at the trade deadline from the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. And let's remember a couple things about Brandon Marsh before we get into this. First of all, he is only 24 years of age. He debuted July 18th, 2021. So he's about a year and a half into his time in Major League Baseball. A very, very young player in an organization with the Los Angeles Angels that, frankly, isn't ever that competitive. They do have a solid farm system because they're always bad, but they're an organization that doesn't exactly show a track record of preparing players for major league success. And don't point to Mike Trout as an example of, hey, they can put together an outfielder. No. Mike Trout could play for the worst organization in the history of organizations. He'd still be a monster because he's the best player of this era. Anyway, back to Brandon Marsh. Well, it's an interesting player review for him for the 2022 season because he did not spend the whole 2022 season, obviously, in Philadelphia. So we'll look at his 2022 in total. Then we'll look at the numbers compared comparatively between when he was in LA and when he was in Philadelphia, because Brandon Marsh, more than I think any other player on this team, is not just a review of his 2022. It's a review of Kevin Long, hitting coach Kevin Long's 2022. Kevin Long, of course, the owner of a new 2-year contract to be the hitting coach of the Phillies. Much deserved. He just got that a couple days ago, so congrats to Kevin Long. And let me tell you part of the reason why he got that contract, because Brandon Marsh was a big part of it. Now, career, he's a 248 hitter. In 2022, he batted 245 for the year with 11 home runs, 104 hits. He went over 100 hits on the year, which is a solid mark for him. And here's his slash numbers: 245, 295 OBP, 384 slugging with a 679 OPS. You're not going to get a lot of power from Brandon Marsh. It's understood. He's a incredible defensive player, and he's a guy that you're going to look at that you want to get on base a lot because of his speed and his ability to hit the baseball for contact, but he's not really going to leave the yard all that much. We'll talk about his moment of the year in which he did leave the yard coming up in a little bit, but that's not really what he was. But those were his stats for the entirety of 2022. Let's break down what he was with the Angels and what he was with the Phillies. First of all, I should say, he played 93 games in Los Angeles this year. Only played 41 with Philly, so a bit of a difference there. You're looking at 52 games worth of difference. But the numbers, strikingly different. His batting average in Los Angeles this year was 226. His batting average with the Phillies, 288 since he came here. His slash marks, 226, 284, 353 with the Angels. With the Phillies, it was 288, 319, 455. His slugging, a full 102 points higher. His batting average, a full 62 points higher. His OBP, 35 points higher. I mean, this is a guy that was significantly better in Philadelphia, and those numbers right there are a credit to Kevin Long, the hitting coach of the Phillies, who looked at this guy at the trade deadline, talked with Dave Dombrowski, and basically they came to the idea that, yeah, we can fix this guy. We can make him a really good major league hitter. And in the small sample size that they had of 40-some games, well, yeah, he very much looked like it. Now, he is not a free agent until the year 2028. And he's not arbitration eligible until 2025. So the Philadelphia Phillies get him absolutely dirt cheap as well. It's just really a great move early. And we'll see what he is over the course of a full season and how he continues to progress as a young player who's going to hold down center field for the Phillies for, we hope, a long time. But the early returns on Brandon Marsh look really, really good from Dave Dombrowski and company, who decided to bring him in. What was his biggest moment of the year? Well, undoubtedly, it was the home run in the NLDS against the Atlanta Braves. A huge, huge moment for him. And it really just, it got the Phillies going in a time where they really needed to get going. You've got the setup with everything going on. The Spencer Strider injury was looming over that series. The Braves starting pitching was so good, and Brandon Marsh depositing one in the right field seats really felt like it was the wake-up call for the Phillies to say, hey, we've got this guy. A guy that doesn't normally go yard in Brandon Marsh has finally broken through in the playoffs. He didn't really look great when he had the opportunities prior to that, but, well, now you know that you're seeing a pitcher well when a guy like Brandon Marsh goes yard. It feels like it's not the same thing as the Joe Blanton home run from the 2008 run, not remotely. But sometimes when you see a guy that doesn't have the ability to leave the yard, hit a home run, it motivates you more than when a guy like Bryce Harper or Kyle Schwarber does it, because you almost expect that from them. So the NLDS home run by Brandon Marsh off of the Atlanta Braves is what I would say is his big moment of the year, and hopefully many more big moments to come for Brandon Marsh. And in a small sample size, taking in what he did defensively as well, a great defensive player, the best defensive outfielder the Phillies have had in a while, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give Brandon Marsh a B+ for his 2022 season. Went a little bit quiet at the dish down the stretch, and I know he's a young player, and postseason it's tough, but he now has postseason experience from this past run. So, yeah, Brandon Marsh, B+. I feel very comfortable with that. We're going to do something special coming up as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Phillies too. We're going to do a little bit of stepping off. Stepping off is a special segment. I haven't done it in a while. I like to do it on Wednesdays to break up the week, to kind of take a step away from the X's and O's of Phillies baseball during the season, the offseason news during the offseason, and kind of do something a little bit off the wall. Stepping off, it's called, because I pitch. So, like, when you want to take a break from something and collect your thoughts, step off the rubber, take a deep breath, and then you're ready to step back on and get after it and pitch again. So coming up next, we'll have a fun side topic and stepping off that you're not going to want to miss as we wrap up Locked On Phillies. And I want to tell you first about my friends over on BetOnline, because betonline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer and esports, they've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, wrapping up today with stepping off. I want to talk a little bit of something off the wall. But this year, there were a couple of relationships that were developed that were very evident to me. When you go on a deep run, like the Philadelphia Phillies did to the World Series, the team becomes very, very tight. But on top of that, there are also some specific relationships between two players that seem to stand out, guys that get really, really close. So I want to highlight my Mount Rushmore of 2022 Philadelphia Phillies bromances, not in any specific order, but just the top four that I saw develop between a couple players, two players, that is, because you can't have the bro love triangle, I guess it would be if there were three of them, but over the season of 2022. And just a fun insight that I got sometimes from being in the locker room, talking to some of these guys, and also just following the team throughout the year. So the first one, the easiest one to put on here, Jean Segura and Bryson Stott. Those guys basically became best friends from the second that Bryson Stott decided that he was going to be a major league shortstop and proved that he had the ability to take over that position. Jean Segura, of course, at second base. And there was such fun stuff between the two of them, the banter and everything there. The advice that Jean Segura gave him, there was a point when Bryson Stott kind of widened his stance and he started trying to take a more two-strike approach. And it's because Jean Segura said, hey, man, you're really good with two strikes. Why don't you just do that always? The double play duo there. And unfortunately, it looks like Jean Segura most likely will not be back with the team this next year. So it was just a one-year bromance. But the Jean Segura, Bryson Stott bromance definitely has to be up there. The next one, the Bryce Harper, JT Realmuto bromance. Now, their wives are friendly. They're kind of similar guys in that they handle their business on the field. You look to them to be leaders, but they're not really vocal leaders. You're not going to ever hear them come out after a game and like yell about something or this, that, and the other thing. But those guys, it was kind of the silent smoldering bromance between JT Realmuto and Bryce Harper. And you could see it when they celebrated after the NLDS, after the NLCS. And those are the only two celebrations at home. So those are the ones that I was able to witness in person. They have a special relationship. So those are the two, like, hey, we're going to be the core guys of this team. And I know you added Kyle Schwarber. I know you added Nick Castellanos. I know you got the pitchers, but the pitchers are always kind of a little bit separated from the position players. Those two are definitely up there. The next one I'm going to bring up, going to be Garrett Stubbs and Alec Bohm. Now, this could have been any two guys in the daycare, but I think they were the two catalysts of the daycare type of mentality. Bryson Stott was also in it. Matt Vierling in it. Brandon Marsh came along partway through the year and was a part of it. But those are the two guys that kind of like felt like they bought into it the most, and they were always clowning around. And in the locker room, they'd be clowning around. Garrett Stubbs is an absolute character. Alec Bohm can be as well. And you saw them in the celebration, kind of letting that personality out. So those two as members of the Phillies daycare. And then the final one that I want to talk about is Jose Alvarado and Sir Anthony Dominguez. And this one is a little bit more understated, but it gave us the strike one, strike two, good luck saying that came out of the 2022 Philadelphia Phillies. And that's about those two, one from the right side, one from the left side. And they knew that once you get strike two on a batter and you have the stuff that they have, you can get them out. And those guys developing that phrase together and believing in each other and knowing that they're the top two guys in the bullpen, they had that kind of tight relationship. Not as much evident as the other ones, but one that indeed was more of a professional bromance in that, hey, I'm the left-handed version of him and he's the right-handed version of me, and we're going to absolutely dominate when we're out there on the mound. So the strike one, strike two, good luck bromance is also up there. So those are the four I'd put on the Phillies bromance Mount Rushmore. If I missed one, go ahead and let me know in the comments. But that's all for today's Locked On Phillies, and that was stepping off there to wrap it up. So I want to thank you one more time for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Now make your next listen Locked On Sports today. Biggest breaking news in sports from around the major sports in the United States here, the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLB, all the big news. You've got it on Locked On Sports today. It's available on YouTube, Odyssey app, wherever you get your podcasts, just like we are here on Locked On Phillies. Thank you as always for joining us. And hey, another episode tomorrow. So I will talk to you same time, same place tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.